The Warriors have dreams of acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo, per Sam Amick of The Athletic. So we can now officially add Giannis to the list. The Warriors have tried and failed to get Paul George and/or Lauri Markkanen this offseason. They've been connected to Jimmy Butler as well, and now apparently they want to go after Giannis. And there is a real way to make this happen, by the way. Just imagine Steph running a pick and roll with Giannis, Steve Kerr using him as a 5 in these lineups with great spacing, all the great ball movement that the Warriors have been known for, with Giannis at the center of it all. That's a super exciting thing to think about. But first you might be wondering, why would Giannis want to leave the Bucks? They're still contenders. Well, since winning the 2021 title, the Bucks have won one playoff series. That is it. They have lost in the first round each of the last 2 years, and with an aging roster, things don't appear to be getting better anytime soon. But also, a lot of that lack of success in the playoffs is on Giannis. He's missed 8 of the last 11 playoff games for the Bucks, and although he doesn't really have the injury-prone label like someone like Joel Embiid does, in the playoffs, at least the last few years, they have had no chance to make noise because Giannis hasn't been available. Now, having said that, you could also use that as an argument for Giannis to leave. If a team can't survive even a few games without their best player, then that probably isn't a great sign for the construction of the roster, especially one that is getting older, not better. But that also was the entire point of the big move that the Bucks made last offseason, trading for Damian Lillard. Prior to the Lillard trade, while the Bucks were good and of course won the 2021 title, everything went through Giannis. Chris Middleton, when healthy, is a really good offensive player and honestly probably a little bit underrated. And Jrue Holiday was good for them too. But neither of them represent the kind of true star sidekick that a lot of contending teams have. The Celtics are a great team overall. The Mavs have Kyrie for Luka. When the Nuggets won the title, Jamal Murray was playing out of his mind alongside Jokic. Meanwhile, Giannis had Chris Middleton. It worked, of course, but anytime you're that reliant on your best player, that guy starts looking around at other options, which is exactly why the Bucks made the aggressive move last offseason to add Damian Lillard. The problem is, that didn't work either. In what was the definition of a disaster season for the Bucks last year, Giannis and Dame just never really got into a rhythm. They both missed time due to injury, as did Chris Middleton, and as a result, they just kind of looked like a disjointed mess when they did play together. And disjointed mess is also a pretty good way to describe the coaching situation in Milwaukee last year too. They started the year with Adrian Griffin, who was losing assistants before the season even started, which is never a good sign. And about halfway through the year, the Bucks decided to move on from Griffin in a pretty shocking move and bring in Doc Rivers. While there were some improvements after the coaching change, we never really got to see what the Bucks look like with a functional coach, fully healthy, and in the postseason because of the Giannis injury, which just leaves the team as one big question mark right now, including the future of Giannis in Milwaukee as a whole. And we have gone through this before with Giannis. A few years ago, there were some rumors that he might leave for the Miami Heat or go to Dallas and play with Luka. But then he signed an extension. The Bucks traded for Jrue Holiday. They won the 2021 title, all within a span of like 9 months. But this time, I'm not sure things are going to go the same way. They've already made their version of the Jrue Holiday trade by trading for Dame, and even though you can basically write off last season because even Dame himself said that he wasn't ready for the season and all the other craziness that we've already talked about, there is no guarantee that this Bucks team, when healthy, is a true threat to the Celtics in the East, not to mention new threats popping up like the Knicks and Sixers, which is how we get to where we are now, with teams circling Giannis as their next big target to try and steal him away from the Bucks. So how exactly would this work? We will get to the free agency part of this in a second, but right now, this of course would have to be a trade. The Warriors do have a bunch of assets to make this work, and they would need all of them to try and get the Bucks to move Giannis. Steph and Draymond would have to stay with the Warriors to keep them as contenders, but everybody else, either as an asset or salary filler, is on the table. The max offer from the Warriors would be Jonathan Kuminga, who still needs a new extension, Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody, all the picks they can trade, and the contracts of Andrew Wiggins and others to make the money work. That would obviously be a ton for the Warriors, and they'd have to fill in the rest of the roster with cheap players, but it is Giannis after all. We know the Warriors really value Podziemski, potentially even over someone like Kuminga, but there's no way that you can make a Giannis trade without giving up all of their young players. For the Bucks, they get these assets and can start tearing down the rest of the roster as well, getting value for Lillard, Middleton, and Brook Lopez while building the team of the future. Obviously, this would be tough because they owe their own picks to teams like the Trailblazers and others, but that's just the reality of the situation. If the Warriors could pull this off, even with a lack of depth, with Steph and Draymond still there alongside Giannis, If fully healthy, they'd almost certainly be near the top of the Western Conference. The problem, of course, is getting the Bucks to trade Giannis in the first place, which right now seems unlikely. Unlike last time that we thought Giannis might get moved, there is no free agency pressure to force the Bucks into making a move. Giannis can't become a free agent until 2027, and even if he was unhappy and wanted to go to the Warriors, his options in terms of forcing the Bucks to trade him basically don't exist. But you might be wondering, is that really true? There has been a trend over the last few seasons where players with multiple years left on their deals have been able to force a trade. Just in the last few seasons, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, and even Damian Lillard have all been able to force their way out without the pressure of free agency. But this situation feels different. As much as Dame meant to the Blazers, they weren't even remotely as close to as good as the Bucks still are when he wanted out. The Ben Simmons situation is just a complete outlier, and he had to miss most of a season to make that deal happen, which Giannis just won't do. And the Nets had a pretty clear path to a rebuild when they traded KD, not to mention Giannis means so much more historically to the Bucks as a franchise than Durant did to the Nets. Giannis would essentially have to demand a trade, threaten to not play if that trade request isn't granted, and also make it clear that he only wanted to go to the Warriors, which technically isn't impossible right now, but it might as well be. If he was a 2025 free agent and the Bucks were concerned they might lose him for nothing, this would be much more realistic. And all of this is an issue for the Warriors because they are running out of time. There is a reason that we have seen so many rumors with them connected to stars like Butler, George, and Markkanen this offseason. They are desperate to add another star alongside Steph and try and push for one more title. And they have the assets to make a deal work. What appears to have held them back to this point is how many of those assets they'd be willing to give up in a deal, as they didn't want to part with Kuminga and Podziemski for either Paul George or Lauri Markkanen, but obviously Giannis would be different. For this to happen right now for the Warriors, a couple of things would have to go their way. This season would have to be even more of a disaster for the Bucks than last year was, whether it be due to injuries or otherwise. It would have to be abundantly clear to Giannis that he has no chance to win a title with the Bucks right now or anytime soon. The coaching uncertainty and roster changes have likely already started a movement in that direction, but Giannis has always been loyal to Milwaukee. While yes, he has used his free agency leverage in the past to force the Bucks to make moves like with Jrue Holiday a few years ago, but he was never truly threatening to leave the team. But this might be different. This is as bad as it has been in the Giannis era in Milwaukee since they truly became contenders. And the biggest part of all this is the fact that it's probably not going to get any better. All the key pieces are old. They can't sustain success without Giannis on the floor, and the stability that Coach Bud provided in the past is gone too. Maybe some of the young guys step up this year and the Bucks are awesome. Dame gets back to his old ways and they win 60 games and they're the 1 seed. That's a possibility, but it seems unlikely. The only thing that is still holding up the Bucks as a possible contender is Giannis himself, and at some point he might realize that. He already got his title with the team that drafted him. I don't think anybody would really blame him if he wanted out. And although it seems unlikely right now, it is clear that teams like the Warriors are gearing up for a potential run at Giannis.